Could Dallas Cowboys wide receiver Jalen Tolbert finish the year as the number 3 receiver on this team? All that more this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, one of the players that we've talked about a lot this offseason is Jalen Tolbert. He's clearly one of the most improved receivers on this team. And I think a lot of people want to know, is there a chance that he finishes the year as the number 3 wide receiver on this team?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely, in the realm of possibilities. I mean, just look at the trajectory he's shown us so far this offseason. Like he's gone from a situation where, we weren't sure he was going to make the team as the OTA started, just based on everything that had happened last year. And then, goes into OTAs, shines bright like a star, goes into training camp, continues that, goes into the preseason, continues to continue that. And now we're marching towards the regular season. And not only is he kind of gotten a solid grip on wide receiver 4, Michael Gallup, even the other day in one of these interviews, mentioned that he felt like Tolbert was coming for his job. So, the trajectory is certainly correct for that to be happening. If he continues to play with a level of confidence, then I have no doubts that he has the ability to do that. But I will caution us that, as positive as all these signs have been, there is still one more big step, and that's to play that way, to show what he's shown in the regular season. And I think that's going to be the ultimate test, right? If he can carry this over to the regular season, continue to kind of produce and be a place where Dak wants to throw the football, I think that there's a chance that even if he doesn't become wide receiver 3, that he's getting opportunities and chances to get on the field at a pace that's similar to Gallup's. And I think that's nothing but a positive sign.
So a couple of things really quickly. I want to talk about Tolbert before we talk about where he fits in, but I watched a video today of all of his targets in the preseason. And I typically don't want to overreact to preseason production, all that kind of stuff, because it doesn't matter. But one of my takeaways was from watching this video was the amount of different types of catches and plays that he's made in the preseason. We saw last week he made a back shoulder catch down the sideline. Yeah. There was a play in the second quarter where he ran a comeback route and Will Greer threw the ball really high. I'm talking like really high, and Tolbert went up and grabbed it out of the air. There was a slant pass that he kind of double caught, which we talked about earlier in this week. Still impressive. There was the vertical route that he made against Jacksonville in the first week of the preseason, where he located the ball. Yes, he got called for pass interference, but just a phenomenal job there. Yep. He's doing everything, and he's making some ridiculously tough catches, and he's just doing everything so well right now that you do feel like everything is starting to come together for him a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I think the versatility in which he's being used, in which he can, produce. He hasn't just caught like 12 slant passes in 12 practices,
or
right?
Screens
like
gimme throws.
And that's the other thing too, is that it's not even just that. It's like he's also lining up all over the place, right? He's outside, he's inside. He's really shown an ability to run the routes from the inside, which is great for another big guy like that. Similar to CeeDee Lamb kind of size that can run routes like that. So. I think it's all the things, right? It's his route running on the inside. It's his route running on the outside. It's his blocking. It's his every single thing about his game compared to last year is better.
Yep.
And it's not like in one area that you've seen the improvement. It's his whole game that has been elevated. And that's why I think that we're excited, right? Like if he was just like a go route guy who was catching a ton of passes down the field, that would be great too. But it's like, okay, that's a role guy. But what we've seen from Jalen Tolbert is a very balanced, versatile wide receiver who, is the kind of player that you usually see as a wide receiver that's in the rotation, that's getting snaps, that is a starter in the NFL.
Yeah, I think he's the type of player that you feel comfortable going into a game being like, okay, we're going to get him 7 targets and we can feel comfortable that he's going to catch 5 or 6 of them. And we can go to him in big situations compared to, I don't know, pick a deep threat receiver that you feel like, okay, we're going to try to scheme up 1 or 2 shots a game. And that's going to be his role. Like, that's just not Jalen Tolbert.
The name I keep coming up with, Cedric Wilson, right?
Yes.
Like Wilson was that guy, maybe not the special teams aspect of it, but as far as a down roster wide receiver that in a big moment you would have absolutely no qualms throwing the football to if you had to. That's what I think Jalen Tolbert is shooting for right now. Plus,
I'll give you a great example of that. In 2021 against the Patriots, there was at the end of the game, there was a 4th and 9 where the Cowboys needed to convert to go get the field goal to go to overtime. They ran an out route with Jalen Tolbert, and the ball was high. Or sorry, not with Jalen Tolbert, with Cedric Wilson. The ball was high. He made the catch because CD wasn't open. Amari, I don't think, played in that game. I don't believe. But it was Cedric Wilson who made really the play of the game to keep the game going. I think that's going to be Jalen Tolbert's role, is make some big catches whenever we're called on you, and then maybe we'll try to increase your role as the season goes on. One of the reasons, though, Lane, I'm a little bit hesitant to say that he's going to pass Michael Gallup on the depth chart is I still think Gallup is the best receiver on this team at kind of vibing with Dak when things go wrong. Like when he has to play out of structure, like it seems like Dak loves to go to Gallup, and they just have a really good feel and chemistry together. We just haven't seen Tolbert and Dak play really at all together yet.
Enough of that. Yeah, I think that's ultimately the issue, right? Is that we just haven't seen them enough to know how well the scramble drill runs with Tolbert, right? Yeah. But I do think that he is similar to Gallup in that sense that he's got a large catch radius. He's a big and physical player. He can go up and get the football. So I do think that once he kind of gains that chemistry out of structure with Dak, he will be similar to Gallup in that sense of, hey, I know where I need to go. I know how to kind of find a soft spot, and I know how to use my athletic ability to make sure that, a fast pass or an errant pass that's being made while escaping pressure, that I can get a hold of it and reel it in and make sure it's a completion.
I do wonder if ultimately the Cowboys aren't going to just kind of, I don't want to say get rid of number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, but just kind of spread the snaps out a little bit more evenly, especially with like somebody like Gallup who has an injury history. Brandon Cooks, who's getting a little bit older. I think he turns 30 at some point in the year. Rather than just, hey, these are our 3 receivers and 11 personnel. It's, hey, you're going to take this series, or you're going to take these 4 snaps, and then we're going to take you out to make sure that somebody stays fresh. I think that's probably the best outcome for all the receivers involved. It's just to use more of them.
Yeah, I did too, simply because I think it helps stabilize your passing game, right? If you're not overly reliant on one target who, even the best receivers can have bad days. Sure. So, it's good to have a variety. With this case, you've got like now 6 guys that you feel comfortable kind of running your offense through, all top 4 wide receivers if you had to, the tight end and a running back, So,
Turpin's had a nice camp as well as a number 5 receiver.
Yeah. And so I think that, you look at that and what that provides you is week to week stability if Cooks is injured, or if someone's just not having a good game, or
somebody's a little, like, not even injured, but just a little banged up.
Banged up.
Maybe there's somebody just needs they need a 10-minute break to whatever. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you need a breather, and you're running a hurry up offense, and you feel comfortable. Hey, if Cooks is on the sideline this drive, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, there's plenty of snaps to go around, and if anything, we're not, we're looking for long-term stability and having more of these guys available to you and using them, not just like, having him stashed away for when someone gets injured, but like using him throughout the season so he's ready when his time gets called, or to kind of, like you said, just sort of spread out the wear and tear on some of these older guys, throughout the season, just a little, so it stretches a little bit better. I just think it provides a level of stability in obviously what is the most important aspect of any team, which is the passing, offense. So that's really the biggest benefit, is that you're not going to be kind of constantly holding your breath that, what happens if Cooks gets injured? What happens if Gallup gets injured? What do we do? We've got solutions that, the next man actually can step up and be a productive receiver.
It doesn't feel like a house of cards if one player gets injured the way it has previously in the past. Now, obviously, if CD goes down, I think that's a little bit of a different story. But if Gallup were to miss 2 games with something relatively minor, it feels like you're going to be okay. And maybe this will even give the Cowboys a little bit more opportunities to rest guys in the season, where maybe in previous years they would push players to play through some of the injuries. I think there's just so many benefits now that Jalen Tolbert is really stepping up in practice and in the preseason. Landon, let's get to some more Twitter questions, including one about a Tony Pollard update next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Gametime is the fastest and the easiest way to buy tickets for all of the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you will have. I've already been looking at tickets for Bills Cowboys. I was looking at one for maybe Bills Raiders early in the season. So get on the app, check it out. They have absolutely fantastic deals. It's the fastest growing ticket app in the country for a reason. Get images of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect before you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds. 2 taps and you're set. The tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email to find them. I know that's always a pain. I love that they're right to your phone. Snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Just download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Everydayers, on tomorrow's show, we're going to get you ready for the Cowboys' final preseason game against the Las Vegas Raiders. Make sure you guys tune in for that. But Lena, let's get to some more Twitter questions. We've got a bunch of good ones. This one comes from Evan. He wants to know, I haven't really heard any updates about Tony Pollard since camp has started. Is he practicing, and how does he look?
Yeah, I think this is a situation similar to Tyrant, right? Where he's in there. He hasn't missed any time, but they are just generally, holding him back a lot. And obviously Pollard's a situation where he's coming off of an injury, and that's why they're kind of holding him back. But when he's been out there, he's looked good. Like, he's looked bursty. He's looked like Tony Pollard. You've seen a bunch of different times when he's gotten carries that he's, slicing and dicing through the line and getting big carries. Again, running back is tough, right? Because a training camp, especially, no one's being taken to the ground, right? And so it's hard. Like, every run looks like a big run, in training camp, right? You have to kind of parse, like, when was the first touch and that sort of thing, right? So, and then again, on top of that, he's not had any snaps in a preseason game. He's not going to take any snaps in a preseason game, I imagine. So I can understand the kind of thought process of, is he? We haven't heard anything, we haven't seen anything. He's out there. He's practicing. I haven't seen anything for me to expect anything other than normal Tony Pollard at this point.
Yep.
But I think at this point, to be completely honest, I haven't seen him enough to know if there was like a severe drop down. I mean, I don't see a drop. I mean, I still see a guy who's destroying angles at times, even if they're not, taking him to the ground. So I haven't, let's put it this way. I haven't at one point like stopped and thought, is Tony Pollard going to be okay? Like, it seems like he's fine, and that they are just kind of being very judicious about how he's getting snaps.
As they should. They still have a little bit over 2 weeks until the first game of the year. They also want him to be fresh by the end of the year. Yeah. So there's no reason to give him all these extra snaps in practice in the preseason and wear him down at all. I would expect that the Cowboys would probably be a little hesitant to give him 20-plus touches right away in the season, but that doesn't mean he's not going to get 17 touches. Like, I still think he's going to get absolutely fed early in the year. But again, just to kind of reiterate what you said. I don't see anything to be worried about here at all.
I think if anything, it's, he's worked really hard in the offseason to get back and get healthy. This might be a good time for him to one thing that happens with some of these folks when they rush back from injury is that they're exhausted. They worked so hard in the offseason to recover from the injury that by the time the regular season comes, they never got a break. They never got like an opportunity to kind of take the foot off the gas. Yeah, exactly. So, and I think a lot of what happened to Gallup last year is that, right? Like he worked so hard to get back. And then on top of that was just not 100% sure that he was healthy, and mentally not sure. And I think it really had a toll on him. And I think that that's one of the things that they can try to avoid here by, look, you're here, you cleared, you're passed, you passed your physical, you're clearly, healthy enough to play. We're still going to be judicious, not to incur another injury, but also just to kind of give your body a second before we're about to really, light it up like a Christmas tree with touches. Right. So, and on top of that, I'll just throw in one more thing. They needed this time to sort out the running backs beneath.
Oh, this has been fantastic, right?
Yeah. And getting the opportunity for these young guys is like not only great for their growth, but great for the evaluation for the Cowboys to figure out exactly how they want to assemble the rest of the running back room around Tony Pollard.
Which, by the way, I think they figured it out. Honestly, I mean, we got another preseason game left. We still have 2 weeks of practices. We've got a week and a half or so until cut down days. I mean, again, we've been talking about this all year, but I don't think the Cowboys are going to have a defined number 2 and number 3 running back. I think they've got roles, right? I think Deuce Vaughn is going to be, for the lack of a better term, like your space back, right? Somebody who gives you a little bit of quickness, can do stuff in the receiving game. And I think it's going to be Rico Dowdle, who is your between the tackles, grinded out hard yards, who gives you a little bit more size and explosion. I think those are going to be the 3 running backs on your team.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that it sorted itself out pretty quickly once we, kind of got into the games and saw everything sort out. I think it was beneficial to again, give Pollard a break, but also give Dowdle and Davis both opportunities to work with the ones, and Vaughn obviously eventually as well. So you can kind of see what you had in that group and see what, how the roles get sorted out. So I'm excited about the Cowboys running back room. I think it's actually going to be a strength that a lot of teams a lot of people aren't expecting. And I think they've got some good players in there.
And I'm really excited to see them in the 3rd week of the preseason, because as much as I think Dowdle has that job locked up, I think if he has a really bad game and he fumbles or he can't pass protect, maybe it opens the door for somebody like Malik Davis, or maybe it opens the door for another free agent running back that's going to get cut in a week to potentially come in and steal that job. So I think all 3 of those guys still need to have good performances in week 3 to kind of stabilize their spot on the team. We've got another question from Evan that I want to get to. He said, Jerry Jones said yesterday that they're working on an extension for right tackle Terence Steele. Yeah. What do you expect that contract to look like?
Yeah, Marcus and I were talking about this before the show, and it's interesting because the market's just very interesting right now for tackles, right? And frankly, do you want to go over that list that we kind of
we had several right tackles this year hit free agency. Jaywan Taylor left from Jacksonville to Kansas City. He got $20 million a year. We had Titus Howard, a first-round pick for the Texans a couple years ago. He got $18.5 million a year. Mike McGlinchey left the 49ers to go to the Broncos. He got $17.5 million a year. Caleb McGarry, who was with the Falcons, still is with the Falcons, a former first-round pick, got $11.5 million a year. And then you get past those group, and it's like a bunch of swing tackles like Andrew Wiley, who's 29 years old, got $8 million a year. Trey Pipkins gets $7.5 million a year. And then it really drops off to Riley Reif at $5 million. Yeah. So that's kind of the range that we're looking at for the right tackles.
It's an interesting group, right? And I tend to think he fits well above Caleb McGarry, but maybe beneath Titus Howard, right? Like somewhere in that 11 to 17 range, right? Yep. Probably closer to Titus. So I'm guessing, like 15 million. I think you kind of came up with a number lower than that. But
I think it's going to be, if I had to guess, I think it'll be like a $13.5 million range, because he doesn't have like the Pro Bowls and all the stuff in the first round draft capital that Titus Howard and Mike McGlinchey have. He also doesn't have as many starts as those guys, because he started as a rookie, didn't start a ton. I mean, he started a lot of games in 2021 because Lyle Collins was out, but kind of on and off against starter. Played well last year, but got hurt. So the sample size is still pretty small. And remember, in 2021, he struggled. He was an undrafted free agent right tackle that struggled. 2021 was better. 2022 was the best season to date. I'm betting they give him a lot of money up front. That maybe because he really hasn't made any money being an undrafted free agent. But the overall year, I bet, is a little bit lower just because I just don't think he's got the same pedigree as some of those other guys ahead of him.
Yeah, and I was talking to you too. I feel like these undrafted guys who hit it big, it's really weird to watch them negotiate contracts. Like I feel like it's a little bit more boilerplate when it's a first round pick negotiating a second contract. Easy, I mean, the money may be higher, but the actual, like, slotting into how much you should get paid is pretty straightforward. I think when you get an undrafted free, I mean, honestly, it's like Dak in some ways, right? Yep. You're talking about a 4th round pick who's a franchise quarterback. It's just not an angle that gets done very well.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's hard. The two sides are going to have very different ideas of what they are supposed to be paid. Same thing here. You're talking about a money 5 position that is an undrafted free agent is coming in and expecting, Pro Bowl money, which I think is kind of fair. You saw him play at that level. It's fair for him to ask that for that, I would say. So I think that's what's going to be interesting is that maybe he, is he going to be like that and say, oh, I haven't earned enough money, I'm trying to overreach for my contract? Or is he going to be like, hey, I haven't earned any money, I'll be happy to get some money, just give me some money, and then I'll give you some of these years. So that'll be interesting to see how that sorts out.
It's just so weird because of the top 11 right tackles that are being paid right now, I believe 10 of the 11 were all drafted inside the top 45 picks.
See, there you
go. It's one of those positions like where the draft capital ends up mattering. And I just wonder when they get to the negotiation table, it's like, hey, you're not as valued as some of these guys. Let's pay you in the Rob Havenstein range or the Chuck Okorafor with Pittsburgh or Trey Pipkins, who was a late round pick. Like, I just wonder if that's where he's going to end up. But that's one I don't have a great feel on, to be honest.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, honestly, because it's another data point in this kind of very unique situation of undrafted players at money 5 positions that are going for big contracts and how much money they ask for in relation to their peers, right?
Yeah. Landon, I want to talk about a player that the Cowboys might try to stash in the practice squad that I'm not so sure they're going to be able to get through. We'll get to that next. All right, Landon, our final question here is from @NFL Hacked. I love the Twitter account. He said, easier to sneak on the practice squad, Jalen Brooks, Eric Scott, or Isaiah Land?
Well, I was telling you before the show, I don't think Jalen Brooks is a stash. I think Jalen Brooks has made the team. Look, I'll give you the 2 cents on that real quick. If Jalen Brooks hasn't made the team, I don't know how you make the team as an undrafted free agent wide receiver. I mean, he's had as good as
he's a 7th round pick, but it's basically the
same,
right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's essentially the same thing, right? So, so I think he makes the team. Eric Scott and Isaiah Land are very difficult, right? Like Scott, even more
for
so.
Different reasons, though.
Yeah, right. Well, Scott's really tough because he was a draft pick and the Cowboys traded up for him. So he's on people's targets. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
well, he was at the Shrine game, right? Like, it's not like he's a complete unknown.
Yeah. And again, like we've talked about this before, the Cowboys are known to be one of the teams that have one of the deepest defensive backfield rosters. So if you're looking for defensive backs, you're watching Dallas very closely. So,
well, and I also wonder with the way that it happened last year, where they cut John Ridgeway thinking that they could get him on the 53-man roster, and he got claimed right away. I wonder if the Cowboys are going to be a little bit more hesitant to give up on a 5th round pick.
Maybe, right? Like, and honestly, I think we can make the exact same argument for Land, except for the fact that he wasn't a draft pick. But he wasn't a draft pick, but he got so much guaranteed money as an undrafted free agent. He might as well have been a draft pick.
And he was a Senior Bowl guy that played really well at the Senior Bowl.
And a guy that is at a position that the Cowboys are known to have an incredible amount of depth at and has been hyped up a lot throughout training camp. So I think that both of them are going to be very difficult to try to sneak on, to be honest. And I think that it's the answer to the question is Scott, I think, because of the fact that he was a draft pick, because he got traded up for. But I don't know that it's by much. I think that Land is definitely – I think the Cowboys have done themselves a favor by trying to use Land as a linebacker in the first part of training camp practices so that they weren't kind of necessarily showing his pass rush prowess. But honestly, all teams need to do is turn on the game tape, the last 2 game tapes, and they see Isaiah Land kicking the crap out of every third-string offensive tackle that he's faced, basically.
I'm going to predict that between Land and Scott, one of those 2 players is going to get the Cowboy cough and be on the IR, and they're just going to get stashed there for a year. But I think Scott has a better chance to make it to your practice squad because I don't think he's played particularly well in the preseason, where Isaiah Land has. And listen, I know you can say whatever you want about Pro Football Focus, but when you have 37 players cut from every team, one of the first things that these teams are going to do is they're going to use a site like Pro Football Focus or whatever they have to go see, okay, who are the highest graded players from the preseason that got cut? Isaiah Land has, I think he's got the most pressures of any player in the preseason. There's going to be a team out there just hey, we'll sign him. Let's see what he looks like for 4 weeks. And if it doesn't work, we'll move on. I don't know if the Cowboys have room to keep Isaiah Land on the 53-man roster, but man, it's going to be awfully hard to cut him.
Well, I think, maybe a show that we need to have in the near future, maybe next week we could talk about it, is players that are eligible for funny roster machinations, right? Because I think that's the way you do it, is that you carry Land and then you cut Jonathan Hankins with the deal that, hey, Hankins, you're a vested vet. We'll maybe sign you on the other side of things. I don't know if Hankins, I'm just throwing Hankins' name out there, but that sort of, I know Anger is one of those guys, right?
Yeah,
that,
one.
Or actually Anger's on the 2-year deal, but that sort of situation,
but
right?
I don't know if it really matters because they did it last year. They did it last year with the long snapper. Like, they're going to probably do some funny. I wouldn't even be surprised, like Will Greer, right?
Yeah, I think Greer's definitely. Well, actually, I think I looked that one up. Actually, I don't think that Greer's actually accrued 4 seasons yet because it's got to be a vested vet. So
okay, what about Cooper Rush?
Yeah, Rush would be one. I think any what's his name? 29, the special teams is good.
CJ Goodwin. Oh, he's gonna be on the roster. I'm just telling you.
But I think he could be one of those guys who gets cut, and then you know what I'm saying.
Well, I think it's gonna be one of those things like they cut CJ Goodwin, and then the next day they put Mario Overshawn. Overshawn
on the IR.
Roster. Yeah, and then
they sign him back. I think that's exactly what will happen with some of these guys, right?
Overshown. I got to make sure I say that right. Overshown.
I know Overshown. Overshown is like saying too.
So I think you're going to see some funny things like that happen because this is what the Cowboys do. They it's not very often that they lose a player that they want to keep. Ridgeway was one of them last year.
He was the exception to the rule, really. Yeah. I mean, most of the times these guys, and we talk about all the time, most of the time these guys make it to the practice squad when you try to do it.
Well, and a lot of these players, if you take Isaiah Land, right? The Cowboys gave him a big guaranteed bonus as an undrafted free agent. He knows this defense. He can maybe, if he has a little bit of foresight here, he can see, okay, Dante Fowler's on a 1-year deal. Dorrance Armstrong has a year left. If I just stick around for a little bit on this practice squad, I could potentially have a shot next year rather than I'm going to go ahead and go to a totally different situation with a totally different depth chart. And it's not bad to live in Dallas with no state income tax rather than going out and living in your beautiful state.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're not going to talk about the that here today, but yes, I do think that Land
that's got to matter though, right? Like if you're an undrafted free agent, why if you're making what is it like $16,000 a week or something like that? Why would you want to go to the Los Angeles Rams and all of a sudden get that cut in half? Rather than just stay in Dallas.
I also think that when you stay with the team that originally takes you, like you'll have more leeway. Like if you just get claimed by the Rams randomly and you have like 4 bad days of practice, there's no one there keeping you. Like, you know what I'm saying? They'll cut you right automatically. But if you were brought in as an undrafted free agent, that means that one of these coaches had to work hard for you, had to like recruit you, it had to bring you in. They've been teaching you for all these weeks. I think a lot of times that's why teams like these guys end up staying with the teams that were with them, is because they know that those teams are committed to them in a way that some of these other teams, even if they're not offering them a roster spot right now, they feel like their best chance for their future career is with the team that brought them in.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every day. Again, every day, we'll be back tomorrow to preview the Cowboys Week 3 preseason game against the Las Vegas Raiders. So make sure you tune in for that. Go check out our show on YouTube. We are free and available on all platforms. Go follow Landon on Twitter at BigCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier, and we'll see you next time.